Good evening from London. I hope everybody can hear me, and welcome to our 44th live stream. I am Dr. Dermot Hudson. I'm chairman of the Korean Friendship Association of the UK and chairman of the British Group for the Study of the Juche idea. And as usual, I will speak for a bit, maybe 20, 30 minutes, perhaps slightly longer, and then I will pick up questions from the chat. And I warmly welcome everybody who's just joined. Welcome to KFA Germany, who are also going to assist in the moderation of the chat, and also welcome to ACDT, who is a regular on these live streams, and welcome to Nathan, and welcome to Nothing But the Truth. So tonight I picked out two main subjects to talk about. This year is the 35th anniversary of the collapse, or I should say the frustration of socialism in the USSR, the former Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the first ever workers and peasants state in the world. And at the same time, a number of other socialist states disappeared, but the DPRK did not. So you're going to look at the subject of the DPRK versus perestroika, as it was called. And this was the reactionary and counter-revolutionary ideology or policy of Gorbachev, who took over the leadership of the Soviet Communist Party and the Soviet Union in the 1980s after Konstantin Chernenko had passed away in 1985. And Gorbachev was a revisionist like Khrushchev, and indeed to some extent Brezhnev, but Gorbachev went beyond Khrushchev in that he actually destroyed the Soviet Union and also destroyed quite a number of socialist countries, and did a lot of damage to the world communist movement. This cannot be denied at all. I mean, this is a hard fact. And he put forward in the 1980s the policy of so-called glasnost and perestroika, which some people used to joke about. There was a joke, I'll have a point of glasnost and a packet of perestroika, but it was no laughing matter. I recognized it early on as a new form of revisionism, the new wave of revisionism, and so you're going to look at how the DPRK People's Korea actually responded to glasnost and perestroika and the new wave of revisionism. President Kim Il-sung, very early on, came out against it, and speaking to the Supreme People's Assembly in December 1986, very shortly after perestroika had begun, he said, "The people's government must guard against the poisonous ideas of capitalism and revisionism and resolutely fight against all attempts to infringe upon the socialist system." And similarly, Chairman Kim Jong-il, the great leader, Chairman Kim Jong-il, when he spoke to officials in November 1987, expressed the judgment that the Soviet Union would reap the whirlwind of perestroika, of so-called restructuring, and something bad would happen in the Soviet Union within a few years. And he said it seemed to him that the flag of socialism may be hauled down in the Soviet Union, followed by a gust of capitalist wind sweeping across it. And I think those words were very appropriate. He accurately predicted what was going to happen. And as a result of the onset of Gorbachevite revisionism in the USSR, the Soviet Union started tearing up trade agreements with the DPRK, cutting down on cooperation. And President Kim Il-sung, speaking to officials in January 1987, mentioned this, and said that because the DPRK was not following the road of the modern revisionists, that they were putting pressure on the DPRK because they wanted the DPRK to also adopt perestroika and glasnost and to reform and open up. And this policy was imposed by Gorbachev on a number of countries in the socialist bloc at the time, and I think most tamely accepted it, except for the Romanians, and I believe to a lesser extent the GDR under Honecker. Luckily, Gorbachev never visited the DPRK. He did not visit the DPRK, but I'll tell you where he visited a bit later, because the countries that Gorbachev visited suffered losses, and after he visited China, there was the counter-revolutionary incident in Tiananmen Square. So, I mean, everywhere he went, he was trying to impose glasnost and perestroika. Oh, and one other country that came out against it was, of course, Cuba. The new wave of revisionism led to, first of all, the socialist countries in Eastern Europe collapsing. So on the 22nd of December 1989, Rudolf Simon of the DPRK uh, uh, published an editorial which stated, "Let us vigorously advance along the road of socialism, repulsing the challenge of the imperialists." And it said, "The imperialists have of late become more heated than ever in slandering socialism, talking loudly about the decline of socialism and the victory of the free world. They are behaving impudently and arrogantly against history and committing great crimes against mankind, and they are running headlong to their destruction." And it added that the most important thing in displaying the advantages of socialist society is to strengthen the party leadership. So that editorial made it very clear. As time went on, the chaos in the USSR and the disintegration of the socialist system greatly intensified in the USSR. And as say, by 1990, many of the other socialist countries had gone. So President Kim Il-sung, addressing the Supreme People's Assembly on the 24th of May 1990, said, and I quote, "Comrades, at present, a sharp confrontation and struggle between socialism and imperialism and between progress and reaction are continuing in the international arena. Owing to the cunning and shameless acts of the imperialists to seize their wild dream for world supremacy, successive, unexpected, and complicated events are taking place in many parts of the world, and the People's Socialist cause is facing a grave challenge. This is arousing great anxiety among the progressive people throughout the world who value justice and the future of mankind and aspire to independence. While adhering to power politics, the imperialists are now resorting to what they call the peaceful transition strategy to undermine socialism. They are attempting to turn back the socialist countries back to capitalism by paralyzing the people's revolutionary consciousness through ideological and cultural infiltration and bribing them economically with aid as a bait and brewing socio-political disturbances by instigating the anti-socialist elements. The imperialists are cheering as they clamour about the, quote, crisis of socialism. But this is ridiculous. It is imperialism, none other that is now suffering from an incurable malady. The imperialists themselves are falling into an irretrievable crisis whose days are numbered, cannot decide the people's destiny, nor can it reverse the tide of history. The imperialists, the reactionaries of history, seek to maintain the outmoded society in which exploitation and oppression of man by man prevail, and whereas the popular masses, the motive force of history, desire to build a new society free from exploitation and oppression, a society in which everybody leads an independent and creative life as the master of the state and society and as master of his own destiny. the advance along the road of socialism is the main trend of historical progress. Socialism is the only road for mankind to take. Socialism, which has been made a reality for the first time by the Great October Socialist Revolution and has made a victorious advance since then, has eliminated the age-long outmoded societies and become both the motive force of history, creating new people-orientated societies and the banner of man's emancipation, banner that inspires the world's people in their struggle for independence. Since the way to socialism is an untrodden path, socialism may encounter unexpected obstacles in its progress and suffer temporary setbacks. And also, the way of building socialism has to be improved steadily in accordance with the changing and developing situation. When shortcomings have been revealed in the building of socialism, they must be corrected without hesitation by drawing appropriate lessons from them. It is a recognized fact that criticism and self-criticism are the motive force for the development of socialist society. The point is how to overcome the obstacles that lay in the way of the advance, and how to continue with the socialist cause. Socialism, which is based on collectivism, is a society that develops on principles that are fundamentally different from those of capitalism, which is based on individualism. It is incomparably superior to capitalism if one abandons socialist principles and tries to find solutions to problems in capitalist methods when facing difficulties in the course of building socialism. One will be unable to overcome the obstacles and, worse still, will neutralize the inherent advantages of socialism, finding oneself in confusion and lose even the revolutionary achievements made by shedding one's blood. Socialism can only be built on socialist principles and by socialist methods. All the problems arising in the building of socialism must be solved on the basis of socialist theory, on the principle bringing the advantages of socialism into play, and by giving rein to the inexhaustible creativity of the popular masses, the motive force of the revolution. When the situation is complex and the reactionary offensive is being stepped up, the revolutionary people must hold fast to the revolutionary principles and advance, holding high the banner of socialism. End of quotation. And I think that made the DPRK's attitude to so-called perestroika and glasnost very clear, and it called for solving any problems that arise in socialist society on the basis of socialist methods, not not by capitalist methods. And Chairman Kim Jong-il, a year later, in his work, Our Socialism Centered on the Popular Masses Shall Not Perish, also addressed this point. And he made it very clear when he said, the socialist economy which serves the people is not a market economy, but a planned economy. It is not a dependent, but an independent economy. The market economy, which is geared to money making, and the dependent economy, which enriches foreign monopolists, totally conflict with the interests of the popular masses. Neither of them can develop as fast as a socialist economy that develops on a planned and independent basis. And I think they say that made it very, very clear indeed that the socialist economy is not a market economy, it's a planned economy. And, that's, I think strongly disproved the ideas of Gorbachev, who introduced a market economy in the USSR. And of course, it's also, I think, a sideswipe against Denism, and also talking about economic dependence and economic independence, also a swipe at the South Korean puppets, because the South Korean puppet economy has been advertised as being successful when in fact it's a dependent economy. But I will deal with that subject in another live stream or a separate standalone video. So anyway, as I said, Gorbachev never visited the DPRK. I think something that the Korean people can be truly thankful of. But guess where he did visit? Yes, Gorbachev visited South Korea, Puppet Korea, the Puppet ROK, and he received a bribe of $100,000 from Rote Wu, and the Soviet revisionists also received money from the South Korean puppets, which the South Korean puppets actually themselves didn't really have. It was money borrowed from the US and Japan, but they used it to bribe the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union in 1990 established diplomatic relations with the South Korean puppet regime, a criminal and terrible betrayal of the DPRK by the Soviet revisionists. And at the time, on the 5th of October 1990, the Rudensimon newspaper published a commentary titled "Diplomatic Relations Sold and Bought with Dollars," and that showed you how low the Soviet Union, which was once a socialist country, a workers' and peasant state, had sunk to, that it was accepting bribes from the South Korean fascist puppets. They didn't see anything wrong with joining hands with the South Korean fascist puppet regime, and actually taking their money. And as I say, Gorbachev was later revealed to have accepted a personal bribe from Rote Wu, the South Korean puppet dictator. And of course, I would say here that Gorbachev's death from natural causes a few years ago deprived the Soviet people of the possibility of justice and retribution. President Kim Il-sung, speaking to a visiting US delegation, also made these remarks, and I quote, The imperialists are now waging war without bullets in accordance with the strategy of peaceful transition and are attacking socialism. Owing to this, all sorts of things are happening in the socialist movement. Some people have already been ruined, others are retreating, and yet others have given up socialism and are surrendering to the enemy. It can be said that the socialist movement is now undergoing trials. However, there is no need to be discouraged because of this. Now that the Soviet Union has dropped out of the rank of superpower, the US imperialists are behaving more and more arrogantly and impertinently. How arrogant the United States has become can be clearly seen by the fact it has invaded Panama as soon as its president returned from the Malta summit and disarmed Nicaragua in succession. It recently occupied Saudi Arabia on the plea of the dangerous situation in the Persian Gulf, covetous of the oil resources of that country. That Bush met Gorbachev in Helsinki is not at all because he likes the latter, but because he wants to prevent the Soviet Union from interfering with the US troops stationing in Saudi Arabia. And Gorbachev complied with the requests of the United States. The Soviet Union was once called a great communist state, has ended up in this miserable situation. End of quotation. And as you can see, President Kim Il-sung in both the two last quotations I've used also identified the strategy of the so-called peaceful transition. And, we're not talking about the peaceful transition of capitalism to socialism. We're talking about the reverse, the peaceful transition of socialism back to capitalism. And this was a strategy worked out by the US imperialists. Sometimes it is known as the Dulles Plan, after Allen Dulles, the head of the CIA and also the brother of the architect of the Korean War, J. Foster Dulles, or sometimes called the Kennedy Doctrine. But it's a doctrine of infiltrating into socialist countries and silently and stealthily and slowly infiltrating their ideology into these countries through culture, for example, so that in the end they become capitalist countries. And this was really what happened in the Soviet Union, and President Kim Il-sung identified this in the speeches he made at the time. And one last thing I will mention on this subject before I start to move on to other things is that in August 1991, in late August, I think 18th or 19th of August, some Soviet leaders formed the State Committee for the state of emergency of the USSR and removed Gorbachev from power and put him under house arrest. And so I'm probably going to cover this in another live stream, but because this was an important episode. And it was an attempt to try and stop the declining of the Soviet Union and to restore order from the chaos. The DPRK actually supported this, and they rebroadcast through what was then Radio Pyongyang. It's now Voice of Korea. They rebroadcast the statement of the State Committee for the State of Emergency. However, because of the depth of revisionism in the USSR and capitalist infiltration, this attempt failed. Only lasted 3 days, and the rest is history. And I don't think I should be taking up people's time just outlining this. A few days afterwards, DPRK Vice President Pak Song-chol stated, "The invincible might of our style of socialism is being highly demonstrated." And I also remember reading in the newspaper, The People's Courier, which was published by Koreans in Japan. Chongren used to be able to subscribe to The People's Courier. It was printed on very fine paper, but I remember reading how there was an exchange between of words, not gunfire, of words between a KPA officer at Panmunjom and a Yankee officer. And because, Panmunjom is the so-called truce village, and the KPA officer said, you're wrong to think that a society like the US will appear in the DPRK just because of glasnost and perestroika. So, basically, in this difficult period, the DPRK firmly upheld socialist principles and kept the red flag of socialism flying, totally rejecting perestroika and glasnost. It had absolutely no influence at all in the DPRK. And one reason for that is because the DPRK is self-reliant. And that brings me on to the other subject tonight, why self-reliance is good, why self-reliance is great. And I think to those of us who have visited the DPRK many times, it is fairly self-evident. It's fairly obvious, but I think, people who haven't seen the reality of the DPRK with their own eyes, it is perhaps not so obvious. President Kim Il-sung himself stated that Juche and self-reliance are the basis of all the DPRK's achievements. And at the 8th Congress of the Workers' Party of Korea in the 2021, January 21, respected Comrade Kim Jong-un identified 3 core principles that should guide the future work of the Workers' Party of Korea and its leadership. One was believing in the people as in heaven. Another one was single-hearted unity. And the third was self-reliance. And this was reaffirmed at the 9th Congress of the Workers' Party of Korea that was held earlier this year. And by self-reliance, it doesn't actually mean that you don't import anything. What it is, it's about maximizing your own resources and you know mobilizing and utilizing all potentials within your own country. Of course, if there are things that cannot be made, uh, for good reasons in your own country, then these are imported. But you maximize your your resources, and it means that the main factor in advance is not foreign aid or assistance, but your own efforts. And some people make a lot of the fact that after the Korean War, or Fatherland Liberation War, as it's called in the DPRK, the DPRK received some aid from fraternal countries like the USSR, like the People's Republic of China, and some others. But although the Korean people were grateful for this aid, for this assistance, the main thing was their own efforts. And President Kim Il-sung always stressed that, the people of the country do not make any effort, then any outside assistance is useless. And, I think this is very much proved by the DPRK's experience, but also the experience of other countries around the world, where some countries received generous aid, but got nowhere. In fact, often foreign aid can be very detrimental in that it can discourage efforts to utilize one's own resources. People can become indolent and slack because of it. And we're still with aid from imperialism, from the imperialist countries. It's been proved many times, and I think this what I'm going to say now is probably an understatement, that for every single dollar of aid that the imperialists give, they take away $10. I think maybe it's actually $100. And often imperialist countries made aid dependent on the recipient country ordering goods from the donor country. And really, over the last few decades, often aid is given only on the condition that the recipient countries carry out cutbacks, restructuring, privatization, etc. So it is, in fact, far better to adopt self-reliance. In fact, not just far better, it's actually a necessity. And the experience of the DPRK in self-reliant economic construction proves this. From the 1950s, from 1950 to 1970, the DPRK industrialized. It had an annual growth rate of 19.1%. in terms of industrial output value. During the 1950s, the DPRK economy advanced at a very fast rate. Steel workers at Kangsan actually doubled steel production in one year, and a flat in Pyongyang, builders were able to build a flat every 14 minutes. Incredible. And today's DPRK has really advanced way beyond, I think, a lot of people's expectations as compared to the past. And I witnessed this when I visited the DPRK in 2024 and 2025, where I saw whole areas of Pyongyang that simply were not there when I'd last visited in 2019. And this is all due to self-reliance, because the DPRK, because of the abnormal world health situation, the global pandemic, took the measure of closing the border from January 2020, only really started opening again in 2023. Now, a lot of countries, wouldn't have been able to do that. They wouldn't survive a few days with the border shut, let alone 3 or 4 years. If Britain shut its border and cut itself off, everything would grind to halt within a matter of days. But because of self-reliance, the DPRK was able to do this. And when in 2022 the DPRK fell victim to the inroads of COVID-19, which was deliberately spread by the South Korean puppets using balloons. Let's not forget that, and that they were responsible for this calamity. The DPRK solved it by their own efforts through self-reliance, without outside aid and without imperialist vaccines. They were offered them but rejected them. Later, Rudon Sinmun, the newspaper of the Workers' Party of Korea, stated that imperialist aid is a poisoned candy. And self-reliance will lead the people of the DPRK to greater victories. So before I finish speaking, give myself a rest, and also give all these people who've joined tonight a chance to answer questions. I got asked by a friend to say a few words about Cuba. And Cuba, to me, is a simple but at the same time complicated subject. In the past, they had very good relations with the DPRK in the era of Fidel and Che Guevara. In fact, the DPRK was one of the first socialist countries that Che Guevara visited in August 1960, less than a year after the Cuban Revolution. And he said that the DPRK is the country, the socialist country, that he admired the most. And because people are now very worried about the situation in Cuba, because of the US blockade and the sanctions and US covert warfare, sabotage, as well as psychological warfare, it's created a very bad situation. And there is talk, well, it's not just talk, because there is a US aircraft carrier very near to Cuba that the US are going to intervene in Cuba and affect regime change through military intervention, which the US have done in a lot of countries in the past. And I think the mechanism for regime change in Cuba will be the arrest of General or kidnapping of General Raul Castro, the brother of Fidel, and a veteran of the Cuban Revolution. Now, the US have actually indicted him, and I think they will try and abduct or kidnap Raul, like they did to Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. And according to the Venezuelan playbook of the US, the Venezuelan scenario, they would kidnap and remove Raul, and in his place there would be a revisionist leadership would come to power and would carry out reforms and opening up, and would destroy what is left of Cuban socialism. So my views on Cuba are complex. It was a very close friend of the DPRK and close ally. Some people said it was a bit like the DPRK, particularly in the 60s. However, it has shown signs of revisionism after the passing away of Fidel, and very unfortunately, in early 2024, established relations with the South Korean puppets. Previously, it had taken a very revolutionary and principled position and never established relations with the puppets, but it did now. But that has not served the Cuban people, I think. That's my personal opinion. But I certainly, for one, despite certain unease about certain aspects of what has been going on in Cuba for past decade or so, I certainly, if Cuba is attacked, I would be out on the streets to denounce the barbaric US imperialists for their criminal attempts to colonize Cuba and to extinguish the socialist system in Cuba. So I will conclude there. Thank people for their attention. I thank the other moderator. And I will now, I hope I don't miss questions. And yeah, I mean, the chat is funny. Sometimes it lags way behind. Sometimes stuff doesn't get through. All sorts of things. So I'll go down the chat and answer. I think it said hello to a couple of people. Yes, hello to Flame of Liberation. Great to have you on the chats on the street, listening in tonight. Hello to Red Star Nainara. Hello to Tempest YT8. It is YT8. I kept reading that as YTB a couple of times. Hello to DNZ P9Q. Hello to Nothing But Truth. Hello to our friend from Colombia. Hello to friends from Turkey. Okay, we're starting to get on uh, with on to the questions as perestroika and revisionism. Your opinion on the well, this person who you mention is unknown in the DPRK. You know that's the simple answer. So and whatever he thought of revisionism in the neighbouring country was of no relevance whatsoever. Yes, good evening to our good friend from Turkey who's always retweeting our tweets on Twitter. Right, Flame of Liberation. YouTube is censoring messages in the chat. I tried to write a message 3 times about how Gorbachev betrayed Iraq and Afghanistan, but I reloaded the page each time and it didn't go through. Yeah, I like you say, I mean, YouTube and StreamYard, they can be funny and, sometimes things don't show up in the chat. Sometimes the chat is lags behind by a couple of minutes, but yeah, that's right. I mean, basically the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan regime basically had relied on Soviet troops to defend their revolution, and Gorbachev stabbed them in the back by agreeing to pull them out. And similarly with Iraq, Ba'athist Iraq, with the 1991 Gulf War, the first Gulf War, the USSR, I believe, voted in the UN Security Council with the US and was against the Ba'athist government in Iraq. But it's all sorts of betrayals by the Soviets in that period. As I say, there was them establishing diplomatic relations with the puppets, I believe with Taiwan, with Israel, also very significantly in this period. Zionism had been officially condemned by the United Nations as racism, because in the 1970s, the Arab countries, backed by the Soviet Union and the Socialist Bloc and some third world countries, passed a resolution which identified Zionism as a form of racism. And of course, Gorbachev made sure that vote was reversed, and so the UN withdrew its condemnation of Zionism as racism. And I think this is a very important fact because nowadays in Britain, and I think in other countries, any criticism of Zionism is always immediately called anti-Semitism, and people can be arrested for criticizing Israel or Zionism if they're not careful. Ajax 321, good afternoon from comrades, and Dr. Hudson, a good evening to you. Flame of Liberation. At the Flame of Liberation, Gorbachev started a long tradition of betraying friendly countries and leaders, from Nijibalá and Milosevic to Maduro. Well, that's very true. I think they were betrayals before Gorbachev, but I think they became far more blatant open and disgusting under Gorbachev, and with people, being stabbed in the back and basically sent to their deaths, even like Nietzsche Bala, like Milosevic, who died in the Hague. We could mention the betrayal of the GDR, which was sold to the US imperialists by the Soviet revisionists, and also the betrayal of Erich Honecker. It's an endless list of betrayals, and I think this itself proves the superiority of self-reliance, the superiority of Juche-based socialism, because the DPRK cannot be bought or sold by anyone, and it is self-reliant. It doesn't have to rely on other countries, and that is why it was able to stand tall and proud and keep the red flag flying when Gorbachev betrayed the Soviet Union, destroyed the Soviet Union, and carried out all these betrayals. It could not be betrayed by Gorbachev or anyone. And if the counter-revolutionary factionalists in the DPRK, the August factionalists in 1956, had succeeded and turned the DPRK into like a pro-Soviet colony, a satellite of the USSR, the DPRK would have disappeared like other socialist countries like Mongolia, for example, or the so-called People's Republic of Kampuchea. It would have disappeared at the end of the 80s, early 90s, like these countries, but it didn't. And, I think this should make people understand the great fatality of the Juche idea and of self-reliance. Does this speech address China's change of policy, the mix of planned economy in the deeper lands and the state capitalist cities, with both having a proletarian political structure? Well, I'm not sure which speech you're referring to, whether it was President Kim Il-sung's speech to the Supreme People's Assembly in May 1990, or the work of Chairman Kim Jong-il, Our Socialism, centered upon the popular masses, on the popular masses shall not perish, of 1991. So I'm not sure which one you're referring to. What President Kim Il-sung did say was in 1989, shortly after the Tiananmen counter-revolutionary incident in China, he referred to careless opening up may let mosquitoes and blowflies in. And he also said that the DPRK did not need to reform or restructure. During the extreme hunger after the Civil War in the 1920s, I assume you're referring to the Soviet Union, British workers collected money and sent them to the Soviet Union to help the young republics. This was a very hard time, and those money saved lives. Well, that's true. And not only that, the British imperialists tried to send aid, munitions, to the White Russians, the counter-revolutionaries, and British dockers, dock workers, prevented the ship, the Jolly George, from being loaded with munitions, which would have been used against the USSR. This was one of the more positive episodes in the history of the British working class. A great example of real internationalism by British workers. Kidnapping a 90-year-old man is not beyond something the Yankees would do. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure they would do that, and it would show how low they are. And they are so shameless. They would end up with blood on their hands. I doubt, that I doubt, that Comrade Rao, at this age of 94, could survive such thing. It is really criminal, and if they do really go ahead with this, they will be condemned, for eternity, for a crime against humanity. But never forget, it was the US imperialists who killed 35,383 people in cold blood in Central County in the DPRK in 1950. Yes, well, Nathan, I hope the books arrive safely. Maybe a difficult question. Do you have a favourite memory from the DPRK? Well, I've visited the DPRK for nearly 35 years. I've been there 20 times, so I've seen all sorts of things. It's really difficult to sort of sort out in one's mind what is the favourite memory. I enjoyed some of the earlier trips to the Juche Idea Academy, which is actually situated in the countryside outside Pyongyang. It was not in the centre of Pyongyang. It was actually quite far from the centre of Pyongyang. And it was a very peaceful place. So let's try to recall favourite memories. Well, I've always quite enjoyed visiting the International Friendship exhibition in Mount Moyhang, because that place is like a museum of the international relations of the DPRK. In some ways, a museum of the international communist movement. For in there, you've got the car sent by Stalin, and you've got a lovely picture of Stalin up on the wall. You got the car sent by Malenkov, and you got the train sent by Chairman Mao. Chairman Mao actually sent a whole train, and that is preserved in there. And you got display cases from all over the world. By the way, these are actually gifts sent by people throughout the world to the Korean great leaders, President Kim Il-sung, Chairman Kim Jong-il, and respected Marshal Kim Jong-un. But you got display cases from many countries. Palestine, for example, you got gifts from the Popular Front for for the Liberation of Palestine, the Democratic Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. You've got gifts from Polisario. Even Albania has its own display case with a big picture of Enver Hoxha above it. There's all sorts of great memories I have from the DPRK. I mean, one of them was 2002, walking about my guide, Mrs. Pack, and it was the Day of the Sun, and it was a wonderful, beautiful atmosphere in the DPRK. And we were going around the streets of Pyongyang, and there was kids eating ice cream and candy floss on the streets. Such a wonderful atmosphere. And then I remember the propaganda against the DPRK that everybody was starving, that there was a double and triple famine or something. And I looked again at realised how unreal, in fact surreal, their lies were. And also I can remember going across Pyongyang at night in search of a coffee shop when we'd been seeing the 10,000 strong performance on the River Taedong. The guide suggested, because it was getting chilly, that we get some coffee. So we went all over that central bit of Pyongyang trying to find a cup of coffee. And that was in itself very, very interesting, because again, you got so much propaganda against the DPRK, and I can say truthfully, I didn't see any homeless people. No one was sleeping in shop doorways like you see in London. It was amazing, and it was clean. And also another great memory is always visiting the revolving restaurant on the top of the Koryo Hotel. All good memories. I've got so many good memories, some funny memories. I could speak for a long time, but I've made several videos about my travels to the DPRK, and because there's my book Travels in the Land of Juche, Korea. So I would recommend you check those out. Yeah. Oh yes, Gorbachev supported the UN resolution against Iraq. But I also thought he was going. He wanted to send troops to Iraq as well. Ah, yes, video games. Yeah, video games are something I tend to stay away from. But yeah, I mean, it was flashing up on one of my news feeds today that they're releasing, I think, something called Call of Duty or Tour of Duty later this year in October, which is going to feature the DPRK attacking the south. And prior to that, there were a lot of anti-DPRK video games and films. KFA actually issued statements against them. There was a very silly one, which was actually a remake of a 1980s American anti-Soviet film called Red Dawn, which actually quite improbably features the DPRK actually invading the United States, which of course the DPRK has absolutely no intention of doing so, and has got no desire to go and try and attack the United States. And I think there was another very anti-DPRK video game, and I can remember also on the London Underground seeing big advertisements for something called Ghost Recon, which featured the DPRK. You could see a KPA officer in the advertising image. But yeah, I mean, it is a way of demonizing and brainwashing young people against the DPRK, as if there isn't enough already. Right, I found a TikTok account with a vlogger from the DPRK doing vlogs from the DPRK. Recently, she had to shut down her account for a while because of the hate and threats she got. Well, I mean, there's several people who do sort of travel log type blogs about the DPRK. Most of them are non ideological. They're not, uh, you know, strong supporters of the DPRK. In fact, one of them is actually really from a tour company, and it's really being done to promote the tours of the DPRK. But that's another story. But yeah, there are orchestrated campaigns. Luckily tonight I've got someone else helping me moderate, so we're keeping, I think, most of the trolls off the live stream, because we've had targeting by trolls both on this live stream and on Facebook pages and on my own Facebook account. I think a lot of it is definitely organised and orchestrated. Some of it's even been done by bots. It's not real people. If you post an image of the leaders on Facebook, you suddenly get a lot of very nasty and hostile comments, and I think that is bots that are programmed to respond in a certain way. And of course, a few years ago, and this is going back about 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, there were several YouTube channels about life in the DPRK being made by ordinary DPRK citizens, like the young woman who I believe was actually a student at Pyongyang University of Foreign Studies, and she used to have a good channel about life, just about life in Pyongyang. Again, it wasn't actually very political or ideological. It was just telling you what it's like in the DPRK, what it's like to live. But flaming YouTube went and deleted it. Yeah, it's common for. We mean people supporting the DPRK, or yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot of cyberbullying going on, and it's very bad. And yeah, yes, I would agree. Every instance shows that when the reactionaries are empowered, like in Afghanistan and Iraq, it is always seemingly women who suffer so heavily for it, whose gains are devastated totally. Yes, I mean, that's very true. And I think the Afghan revolution, which I can remember unfolding, because I was just a lad in 1978, April 1978, when the Afghan revolution, the Great Sewer Revolution, took place, and it did liberate women, and that has been lost. What? Well, James Parker 8776. Well, you've caught me out. What do you think of the CPC new 15-year, 5-year plan? Do you think it is a step away from Denism or a continuation of the status quo? I must admit, I have not studied the new 15th 5-year plan of the PRC. I would say, they'd need to step away from Denism. They would need to restore the State Planning Commission, because that was, as far as I know, that was actually abolished in the 1980s, and that got sorry, not the 1980s, the 1990s. I think it was around 1997, 1998. It was abolished and replaced by the Development and Reform Commission. So I mean, they would have to restore the State Planning Commission, but it's something I will have to try and look up and see if there is really a move away from Denism. Well, Ajax 321. I actually dealt with that subject in my video about the DPRK economy, but I will just put a link to the work of President Kim Il-sung on some theoretical problems of the socialist economy, which was published in 1969. I hope that link works, because it hasn't quite come out a bit strange. I hope people can click and let's see. I just want to see if people can actually. That link seems to work, but that's the work on some theoretical problems of the socialist economy, and in the work there is a section titled "Problems of the Peasant Market in Socialist Society in the Wake of Abolishing It," and it says the peasant market represents a form of trade whereby the peasants sell directly to the population at definite places, part of the farm produce, as well as animal products of the joint economy of cooperative farms and of the sideline of international of individual cooperative farmers though a form of trade in social society, the peasant market retains a lot of remains of capitalism. And he was against trying to drive it underground. And he said, to conclude, the peasant market, as well as the underhand dealings, will disappear and trade will go over finally to the supply system only when the productive force is developed to such an extent the state can sufficiently turn out and supply all kinds of goods required by the people, and cooperative ownership has grown into the ownership of the entire people. Well, the DPRK has actually in recent years has been building these giant greenhouse farms like I saw at Kangdong, which are actually state farms. They're not cooperative farms, and they can mass produce vegetables and all year round because they're in greenhouses. So I think these will actually finally eliminate the farmers markets in the DPRK because people will be able to buy vegetables more cheaply through the state. Right. How can one visit the DPRK? Can you recommend a way? Well, I did have a meeting at the DPRK embassy, and they said if we could find people who wanted to go to the DPRK, we could discuss sending a delegation. You should go to the DPRK through KFA or through Juche, the study group, or other friendship organisations. At the moment, tourists from Britain are not being accepted in the DPRK, but that may well change. The DPRK is cautiously and gradually opening up to tourists, but I mean, the best way to visit the DPRK is part of an official delegation. Don't go as a tourist. For one thing, you'll be stuck with a load of reactionaries. The tour companies tend to take out wealthy bourgeois people who are not friends of the DPRK and just think it's some kind of novelty to visit. But hopefully we will have more information about trips to the DPRK in the near future. I'm studying to become a traditional food cook, and I'm studying gastronomy. Could you speak about the food of the DPRK? I'm planning to cook and study about its gastronomy later on. Well, there's all sorts of food in the DPRK. There's kimchi, and Voice of Korea a couple of months ago did have a video in response to my question about how you can make kimchi. That's one example of Korean food. That is pickled and fermented cabbage. There's many other different dishes. I mean, I enjoy Korean hot pepper sauce, gochujang. Do not know how you can make it. Also, mung bean pancakes. They're wonderful, and always the DPRK ones are the best. The best ones you can get are at the Pyongyang Koryo Hotel. I think you'll have to look at a few recipes. I mean, we did some time ago publish some recipes in the early issues of People's Korea Today. I'll have to dig those out and see if I find a few recipes Of course, the classic dish is Pyongyang cold noodles, which Koreans love and some foreign visitors love. You should try cold noodles at least once. And they obviously have a lot of different barbecue dishes in the DPRK. You know, so that's just an overview of food in the DPRK. No, nothing, not too much is coming into my mind. If I speak too much about food in the DPRK, I might start becoming hungry. Gorbachev lived so long because the devil was afraid that Gorbachev would destroy hell. Yeah, yes, indeed. Hall of Yankee propaganda. Presumably this is a reference to uh, Call of Duty and all this kind of thing. There were Soviet troops in Ba'athist Iraq since the 1970s and 80s, but Gorbachev pulled them out around 1990, which was a signal to the US that Iraq was fair game to target. Well, again, this reinforces the idea that a country needs to be self-reliant. One of the basic principles of the Juche idea is self-reliance in defense, and President Kim Il-sung learned this through the anti-Japanese armed struggle and through the Fatherland Liberation War, and also through the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, which was an early Soviet betrayal, though some people think it wasn't. But they had put the missiles in Cuba only to withdraw them within about 6 days. Right. My boyfriend of some time now has stated he is in favour, an American spelling of favour, of South Korea, quote, is clearly being tricked by propaganda. How can I try to educate him? This a lot could be said about this. So it's hard to try and summarize it and sort of reduce it to a short form. Firstly, you should tell him about the achievements of people's career, such as free housing and other great achievements. Point out that people's career is the genuine Korea. It is really Korean. South Korea, or the Republic of Korea, is not authentic. Its language is a mixture. In South Korea, they are still using Chinese characters. They never reformed their character system, so they still use some Chinese in South Korea. You've got American English words, you've got Japanese words. Their language is a mess. I think more importantly, with South Korea, it's just a colony. It's got no independence. That's what you need to be saying to him. It's occupied by US troops. It's a place full of poverty, prostitution. I think you should, tell him all these facts. To say it's a big question. I mean, maybe I should do a live stream on the subject of DPRK versus South Korea, or a or a standalone video about it. But I say, I think the main point is to stress the achievements of the DPRK, and that it is the authentic Korea with genuine Korean national culture. It hasn't got foreign troops in it. DPRK is not a colonized country. It's not a member of the IMF or WEF or WTO. It is totally independent. What do you think of the news COD or COD? Well, I assume you're actually talking about the acronym for Call of Duty, and you're not talking about cod, the fish, which have become very, very expensive in the UK, which were part of our traditional diet in here, in the UK, namely fish and chips, which are now a luxury item. Anyway, to answer your question, yes, Call of Duty, I was speaking about it earlier. You know, I'd seen this flash up somewhere, and I think the new Call of Duty coming is an anti-DPRK provocation, and it is aiming at brainwashing young people into hating the DPRK. That's what I think about it. The link works, thank you. Messenger quick tips has been removed because it was spam. Well, there is a message that is yeah, I'm just going to try and get that there. That should have got rid of the link to the book. I think it's gone on my screen. How dangerous is it to visit the DPRK? I want to visit, but I'm afraid of access. Yes, do sound a bit like a troll. I just would point out that no foreigner has ever been executed in the DPRK, and all foreigners who got detained in the DPRK were virtually all released within about a year. You know, if you just use common sense, you know, in Britain, we have a saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And so when you go to the DPRK, you should observe local customs and laws. It's as simple as that. Yes, thank you, Cindy the Skull. Uh, yeah, it's good. Yes, I forgot about the Korean Cook Association of Cooks. That's a very good website for food. Yeah, I'll try and cover the subject in the next live stream. In fact, to be a good subject because you know, to answer the question, you know, you can't really answer it in a couple of sentences. You know, it's something that requires a more in-depth answer. Yeah, well, don't worry about the you know, I think we've done well in moderation in moderating tonight because it don't seem to have been the huge number of trolls that there were a few weeks ago. So anyway, if anybody else has got any other questions, I'll take it. Yeah, you know, I think it continue for at least about another 10 minutes or a bit longer if people got questions. Uh, yeah, and then I'll call it a day, and we'd be putting up the link of the live stream. So why do I have some kind of schedule for streams? I don't have a very rigid schedule for them. I aim to try and do them every 2 or 3 weeks. Probably the next one's going to be in 3 weeks' time to avoid clashing with another event. But usually it'd be every 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, when I started, I used to do it every 2 weeks, then it went to a month. And then by popular demand, I came back to every 2 weeks, but then, found my live streams also were at the same time as events by other KFA branches. So, sometimes I vary it to 3 weeks. So the next one will be in, in 3 weeks' time. I'll be sort of making a few announcements about streams activities towards the end. Oh, good question from Nathan. Have you ever visited any other socialist nations, past or present, and what, if so, what did you think of them? Well, in terms of existing socialist countries, sadly, I've never made it to Cuba. I've always wanted to go, but cash is running out. And I don't know, as we were saying earlier, whether time is running out for Cuba. But in terms of the other existing socialist country, if you give China the benefit of the doubt and count it as a socialist country, and I know there's people listening to this live stream who don't count it as a socialist country, but give them the benefit of the doubt. I've travelled through China a number of times on my ways to the DPRK. In fact, all my trips to DPRK since 1994 have involved going through China. And I can say that in my first ever time in China, 1994, the impression was overwhelmingly negative. Came across as quite bureaucratic, expensive, difficult to transit through, money grabbing everywhere. In those days, and don't forget this is 32 years ago, you couldn't cross roads in China because the traffic, the cars and taxis and lorries would stop for the traffic lights, but the bicycles would just ignore them. And if you tried to cross the road, you'd have about 100 bicycles bearing down on you. To be fair, I always try to be fair and objective. Always try to be fair and objective. In terms of just traveling through China, it's improved a lot since then. You can cross cross roads in China now. It's still expensive. You will not see much socialism in China at all. Capitalism has made huge inroads into China. You will see capitalist advertising. You will see hardly any revolutionary posters. I think during my visits in the last 20 years, I only saw about one revolutionary poster, a lot of capitalist advertising, even not just, you had Gucci, you've got McDonald's near Tiananmen Square, which I think is shocking, because that surely should be a sacred revolutionary monument, and something like McDonald's shouldn't be anywhere near it, let alone existing in uh, in China, let alone even existing in China. So yeah, I'm not a great, to put it mildly, I'm not a great fan of China. I only hope that one day it will return to the road of socialism, the road of Mao Zedong. And again, a moot point whether you count Venezuela as a socialist country, but I was there in 2005. Seemed to be a lot of enthusiasm and energy. They seem to be going ahead building new roads and new housing. They'd taken over an American oil company and used the building as a university. However, as I've said on several occasions, there was still footholds of imperialism in Venezuela, like the HSBC Bank. And very clearly a bourgeoisie there who were quite hostile. I remember encountering some of them in the hotel lifts and heard them mutter, "Comunista, comunista." And in terms of past socialist countries, in the 80s, I visited the Hungarian People's Republic twice. The first time I travelled across a lot of the East European socialist countries, I caught a bus from London to West Berlin, transited to the GDR at Friedrichstrasse, and found the GDR border guard really helpful people, and they actually, it didn't take very long to cross through Friedrichstrasse. Some people would say, told me, "Oh, you'll be 3 hours trying to get through Friedrichstrasse." No such thing of the sort. Just went through. Border guard stamped my passport. He looked a bit bored. Another border guard, friendly bloke, he got me a taxi to Bahnhof-Lichtenberg, where I got the night train to Budapest, going through the GDR and Czechoslovakia into Hungary. And I do remember going through, I think, Dresden at night, and the station staff were out on the platform saluting the train. It looked very efficient. However, I did see drunk people in the GDR, saw people wearing jeans as well, sign of Western influence. Hungry, friendly people. Budapest, very beautiful city, but unfortunately, Hungary was very revisionist, and that was also a lot of capitalist influence. There was pictures, posters of Madonna and Rambo, which is a very anti-communist film, were actually on sale in Budapest markets. Reactionary Western publications were on sale. The Times was on sale. Now, that is part of the Murdoch press empire, and at the time the trade unions in Britain were calling on people to boycott the Times, Sunday Times and the Sun, because of what Murdoch had done to the print unions in Britain. But this was actually on sale in Budapest. There was a McDonald's in Budapest. There were shops selling designer clothes. Some of my Hungarian friends told me that many doctors and dentists were making a lot of money by running private clinics on the side, were charging lots of money, and that they were going to big tennis clubs. And on my second visit, I went by train I caught a boat from Britain to Ostend, and a train from Ostend to Vienna, where I changed to the train for Budapest. And as soon as I got out of the train, I was accosted by black market currency dealers. And I can say truthfully, when I've been to the DPRK, all my 20 visits, I've never seen a single black market currency dealer in the DPRK, but in Budapest, so-called socialist Hungary, People's Hungary, they were operating very blatantly and openly, which was shocking. Again, it just reinforced my belief that the DPRK, is the best socialist country. Greetings, comrade. Patrick here. Hello, Patrick. Hope you're well. I visited Croatia recently and plan to give other former Yugoslavian states a go. What is your opinion about Marshal Tito? Well, I think that came up on a few live streams ago. And my mother actually visited Yugoslavia in the 80s and went to what is now Croatia, and she was staying in Zagreb, and she wanted to go to the Tito Museum but caught the wrong bus and ended up in the wrong direction. Well, that's another story. Tito, complex subject. In his last 10 years, he actually had very good relations with the DPRK. That wasn't always the case. Tito was distinguished as a partisan leader, a resistance leader. But after Yugoslavia was liberated, he was not so good, and he was castigated by the rest of the world communist movement, not because supposedly he wanted to be independent of Stalin. I mean, this is how it was portrayed in the West. It was because he wanted to accept aid from the imperialists, the Marshall Plan, and in those days, the socialist camp was united and strong, stretching from East Berlin to Pyongyang, East Berlin to Shanghai. And it was a unified socialist camp. And what he did was to break the unity of it, which was very, very, very bad. And for that reason, at the time, the DPRK did regard him as revisionist. And also, again, I don't want to get sort of bogged down in a long narrative about the internal policies. But I mean, they had a lot of private agriculture in Yugoslavia, which was not collectivized. There was so-called workers' self-management. There was the revisionist concept of elevating the United Front over the party, something the DPRK strongly rejected, and was a sort of key issue in the 1950s in the DPRK. So, his internal policies weren't great. However, Tito became involved in the non-alignment movements, and later sort of distanced himself from some of his earlier policies and pursued a policy of good relations with the DPRK, and actually took some good positions on different international questions, like refusing to recognise the Lon Nol puppet government in Phnom Penh, which the Soviet Union and the GDR did. I mean, I think that is why relations with the DPRK warmed up, because Tito was taking a better position. From what I heard about Yugoslavia, people who visited it, it was not so good. I mean, some people from my school went to Yugoslavia, came back and told me, you've got pornographic magazines on sale there. I mean, that wasn't good. Yeah, I mean, I would say, despite some positive policies, the internal policies were still very revisionist. In one of the worst revisionist countries in Eastern Europe. But Tito did hold Yugoslavia together, which the leaders who came after him did not. So that is my view of Tito. Right. Okay. I'll just answer the last few questions, and then I'll make a few announcements, and that will be it for the day, because I've got a busy few days ahead with a few things. Opinion on Enver Hoxha. Well, I think that's one come up before. Yeah, I think I think there's positives and negatives with Enver Hoxha. I think the positives was building socialism in Albania, and self-reliantly after 1978. And I think he's strong opposition to modern revisionism. And I think Albania, I mean, some people criticise Albania for the bunkers, but I think that's an unfair criticism. I think that was a necessary move to defend Albania against imperialist and revisionist aggression. I think that was absolutely correct. And by the way, it is said that the DPRK actually helped build the bunkers. However, on the negative side, there was ultra-leftism by Hoxha and sectarianism, which resulted in him slandering the DPRK and President Kim Il-sung, though he later slightly walked back on it. One book there is a very, very hostile references. In others, he sort of moved back a bit. And Hoxha is, I think, one of the only leaders out of a socialist country outside the DPRK who acknowledged the fact that the Soviet revisionists were plotting a coup in the DPRK in 1956. But his ultra-leftism led to him, being sadly hostile to the DPRK and disrupting the very good relationship that existed between Albania and the DPRK. But that was repaired a bit a few years before Hodja passed away. And the DPRK was one of the few countries to have a representative at his funeral. Ultimately, I would say with Hodja, was he found revisionism everywhere. He went on a crusade against revisionism, but appeared to overlook it within his own country, as his appointed successor was one Ramazalia, the Albanian Gorbachev, who destroyed socialism in Albania. So today, Albania is not a socialist country. And so when we assess Enver Hoxha, I think we should always bear that fact very strongly in mind. Well, I'd just pick up before I answer the question by Ajax. Hodja believed that Albania was the only socialist country in the world and that all other socialist countries were actually fascist. I don't think he went as far as that. He called the Soviet Union and China social fascist and social imperialist, but I think he just regarded the rest as capitalist or revisionist. But he did strongly advocate the line that Albania was the only true socialist country and tried to form his own international communist movement. And you had several, a number of parties, and today that has gone in a variety of directions. Some of these parties have become burnt out revisionist parties. Some of them are very revisionist. Others have just sort of descended into ultra leftism and dogmatism. So again, something to bear in mind. So the last question that I will answer, Ajax 321, and I think it is a very vital question. How do you reach? Well, let's. The chat's jumped about. Let me see. How do you reach layperson society to solidarity with people? People look at me like a strange alien for being a supporter and defender of people's career. Well, good question, and it's a difficult one. I say the demonisation and propaganda of the DPRK and propaganda of it is like 24/7. So people are so deeply brainwashed. So if you support the DPRK, yes, you're looked at alien. You're looked at like an alien or someone strange or someone eccentric. And indeed, I think nowadays you've got liberal fascism. So often any dissenting opinion is seen as strange or weird. So in terms of reaching lay people, I think to use social media, which I think is essential in this day and age, to use social media like Twitter, Telegram, Facebook, and so on. And also look to give examples where anti-DPRK propaganda has been proved false, like the case of General Ri Yong Gil, supposedly executed, but came back as KPA General Staff. I call that doing quite well, not only resurrected from the dead, but promoted as well. Juche can do wonders, Juche resurrection, but you need to give concrete examples where anti-DPRK propaganda has been proved false. You need to stress the great achievements of Juche socialism, and also always remember that a lot of anti-DPRK propaganda is rooted in racism and Orientalism. And you've always got to bear that in mind. I'm sorry that my answer is a bit brief. I mean, maybe we can take it up the next live stream and sort of hammer away with it a bit more. But the best thing, advice is to give concrete examples where you know propaganda has been against DPRKs has been shown to be lies, and to be brave and to be defiant. And if you're not in KFA, join KFA, because we are a collective of people to defend people's career with no ifs or buts. Right. Well, I'm just going to answer these two questions because, going on. If you had to make a top 10 list of the best socialist leaders, who would you include? Well, I mean, obviously, President Kim Il-sung, Chairman Kim Jong-il, and respected Marshal Kim Jong-un. I would also add Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, Mao Zedong, Zhou Enlai, Ho Chi Minh, Ceausescu. So that I don't know if that quite comes up to 10. I'm not, not counting. Average Welsh residents, how do you think the DPRK handled the collapse of the USSR and very major logistical collapses that followed? Things like no fuel and such. Well, as I was saying at the beginning, I think the DPRK handled it very well, stood on its own 2 feet and proudly flew the red flag. With no fuel, well, yes, I mean, it is true that trade agreements with the DPRK were ripped up by the Soviet revisionists, and the DPRK faced immense difficulties. But just to qualify that, in terms of fuel, it wasn't quite like Cuba, because the DPRK did not use oil for power generation, or not in big quantities. The energy production in the DPRK came from coal and hydroelectric power, and later nuclear power, as well as some other sources of power. But of course, there was an issue with petrol for vehicles and for farm machinery. The DPRK found substitute fuels and basically coped with these challenges and difficulties through self-reliance. And it overcame the arduous march and forced march within a period of 6 years. And it didn't collapse, as we know. Now, I can remember reading in Newsweek, the American coffee table magazine, in 91, saying, "Oh, the DPRK wouldn't last until the end of the year." Well, 35 years later, the DPRK is not only still here, but it is frightening the wits out of the US with its ICBMs and nukes. So I would say the DPRK collapse. The DPRK coped with the collapse of the USSR, or the frustration of socialism in the USSR, very, very well. Is it true that in the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party building, there is a KFC restaurant? Well, I've seen a picture of this. I haven't actually seen it for myself, but what I can tell you is that there is a KFC at Beijing Airport and McDonald's as well, and there's also KFC and McDonald's and Starbucks very close to Tiananmen Square, uh, which is a sort of major revolutionary site. I just don't understand how you can allow such things, uh, near to revolutionary monuments. Anyway, been talking for two hours. So I'll just conclude a few announcements. The next live stream will be in 3 weeks' time to avoid clashing with an event by another KFA branch. On the 6th of June, KFA UK is going to picket the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office to protest against the British sanctions against the SONGUN007 International Children's Camp. Yes, the British government, totally crazy. They've actually sanctioned a children's camp in the DPRK. I mean, this is abominable and disgusting. We've told KFA members to write to their MPs, but direct action, direct protest is needed. So we're going to be on the 6th of June picketing the FCDO. Hope you will come. The pickets will be bigger if more people take the initiative to come. 25th of June, we got a joint meeting with KFA Hungary for the month of solidarity with the Korean people. June 27th, we're picketing the US Embassy in London to mark the anniversary of the provocation of the Fatherland Liberation War by the US imperialists. I just see one more comment. Well, okay, it's Hanukkah's birthday. Well, but we can't really say happy birthday to Eric Honecker, but we should observe the anniversary of the birth of Eric Honecker. Thank you. Yes, you're welcome. And yes, I will have a good night. So, well, I'll see everybody else again in 3 weeks and hopefully at some of the KFA UK events. I wish everybody a very good evening and a good weekend. Thank you.